is cuim na kai na knimi na sarkari.
Chapter 31. My only love sprung from my only hate. Too early seen unknown and known too late. Act 1 Scene V. Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare. It had been easier than Aurnach had anticipated. Blinded by revenge, Laird MacRae had rushed in without waiting for reinforcements. His men, posted by the secret entrance, waited for his return, unaware of how things had turned. Aurnach and his own struck silently, like a dark tide. When Farquhar arrived, he found the passage deserted. No one awaited him. No one would lead him inside. Hours later, the castle was calm and secured. Aurnach returned to his chambers with a poorly closed wound and skin still warm from battle. Liobhan awaited him, needle in hand, with a serene determination that left him speechless. Afterward, they shared a meal at a small makeshift table. Aurnach, legs stretched out and a cup of whisky beether in hand, watched her with a mix of awe and wordless gratitude, as if afraid that looking away might make her vanish. "I've never seen you enjoy a meal this much," he said with a smile. Liobhan looked up, slightly embarrassed. "I haven't been able to eat for days. The nausea's had me cornered." She grimaced. "Especially the herring. Just smelling it turns my stomach." Aurnach froze. A phrase shot through his mind like lightning, "just like my mother." His pulse quickened. It couldn't be. But of course it could. He remembered that night, the clan gathering, the one time he had let his guard down completely. The possibility hit him hard. What if? He took a long drink, trying to seem calm. "Liobhan," he said finally, voice rough, "have you had your bleeding since then?" She frowned, confused at first. Then she brought a hand to her mouth, pale. "A child," she whispered. "It's possible," he replied, barely able to say the words. Liobhan looked down at her flat belly, as if she could sense the silent presence growing within. "God. I hadn't thought of that. I've been so worried, so distracted." Aurnach felt a knot in his throat. He had almost lost them. Out of pride, out of duty. Never again. He stepped closer and wrapped her in his arms, as if holding her to his chest could shield them both from the world. "I'm so sorry, Aurnach," she said through tears. He tilted her face up gently, seeking her eyes. "Don't say that. There's nothing to be sorry for." "You didn't want a child," she said quietly. "I didn't want to lose you," he corrected, with a sincerity that burned in his chest. "And now, there's nothing I want more than this child with you." She looked at him with a mix of relief and love. "What about the alliance?" "There is no alliance anymore. I broke ties with Ardmore. I knew, long before you returned, that I couldn't let you go." Her eyes lit up, and Aurnach knew she understood the cost of that decision. "And Aurnach MacInnes?" He told her about the king's letter, MacRae's fall, how everything had changed. Liobhan smiled with tears in her eyes. "Then my letter to the queen helped. Maybe it wasn't decisive, but it gave me strength. Even before I got it, I'd already decided to come for you. I wrote to your father." "My father. He's here. I want him to see that this time is different. That this isn't a bargain, it's fate." She hugged him tightly. "And you've promised to support him?" "I did it for you, Liobhan. It wasn't a sacrifice, it was a choice." She looked at him for a long time, as if seeing for the first time the man he had become. "So you want to marry me for land?" Aurnach shook his head gently, serious. "I want to marry you because without you I'm nothing. You're my root. You're not my weakness, Liobhan. You're my strength." A silence heavy with tenderness settled between them. Then through tears and laughter she said, "I wish you'd thought that before sending me back to my uncle. I was a fool. But I knew from the start that you were mine." That night, when everything had calmed, Liobhan curled up against him, Aurnach's warm, steady body wrapping around her with powerful stillness. His breathing, deep and rhythmic, was already familiar to her as her own. She felt the curve of her hips fitting his, the firm arm resting over her belly, now different. Now sacred. A child. The thought was so vast it barely fit in her chest. A new life, born from chaos, from love, from forgiveness. Aurnach wasn't asleep. She knew it when his voice brushed her, low and rough. "What are you thinking about, Mojiatri?" "That I didn't know I could be this happy," she said without opening her eyes. "I could stay like this forever." He turned her toward him, with the care of someone holding something fragile. He kissed her nose, then her cheek. "Then maybe. I've been neglecting my duties," he whispered, his mouth brushing hers like a promise. She laughed softly. "Duties? What duties exactly? We're not married yet. And already you're so comfortable you settle for a single position." "Aurnach," she said with a smile, pushing him away, "you haven't even asked me. Are you so sure of my answer?" He sat up with a playful expression, then looked at her with a tenderness that stole her breath. "Want to know why you should marry me? Tell me." "Because without you, life loses its meaning. You're my light. My guide. I love you more than I ever thought possible. And I'll protect this new life inside you with everything I am." Liobhan felt something within her finally give way. All the waiting, all the pain, all the love, had led to this moment. Her answer was a single tear, and a barely whispered word. "Yes." Epilogue. Dunrig Palace, summer of 1603. "Thus with a kiss I die." Act 5, Scene 3, Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare. Aurnach shifted his stance. The air in the audience hall, scented with incense and fresh flowers, felt heavier. He ran a hand over the back of his neck, uneasy, as Liobhan lifted her gaze from the sleeping baby she held with natural maternal grace. She offered him a calm smile, like a breeze lifting fog. "Archena will be fine," she said in a soft, almost intimate tone. "She's in good hands." A slight tilt of her head indicated the rough-looking man guarding her sister like a blend of steel and glass. Aurnach nodded, but didn't respond immediately. His gaze lingered on Liobhan. There was something in her ever since the child was born that unarmed him, a new peace, as if motherhood had anchored her spirit. She was more beautiful now, not in features or fashion but from within, glowing with the certainty of someone who loves and knows herself loved. He brushed the baby's rosy cheek with the back of a finger, barely a touch, afraid to disturb the sleeping miracle. Sometimes he couldn't quite grasp how he'd gotten there. A wife, a daughter, a sister on her way to a place among the powerful. He gave thanks, though he never entirely shed the cautious suspicion etched into his skin by the past. His attention returned to Archena, poised and elegant. Her pinned curls revealed a long neck, her posture proud. She was no longer the humiliated young woman. She was someone else now. "She's been through worse," he murmured. "She's stronger now. Or maybe she always was," he thought. She just needed someone to remind her. Liobhan had been that voice. She was the one who believed this day could come, even when he couldn't imagine it. Dunrig Palace was the final stop on Archena and Branneth's wedding journey, and also a symbol, her entry into the court. Aurnach knew the weight of the support from those favored by the king. Warning Jacobo of a betrayal wasn't a small feat either. Still, he couldn't quite shake off the distrust. "If you keep frowning like that, you'll scare off half the hall," Liobhan whispered teasingly. Aurnach crossed his arms stubbornly. "Good. Let them swallow their tongues before wagging them." Liobhan gave him a look of mock severity. "You promised." "I know," he cut in, resigned. "But it wasn't a fair fight." She stifled a laugh. "Are you questioning my honor, sir?" "Only your schemes." Liobhan raised an amused eyebrow. "They worked." "You're shameless." and you're trapped." Silence fell between them again as Urchenna was announced. Aurnach felt his body tense. Without looking at him, Liobhan laced her fingers through his. The gesture spoke louder than words. Together they watched his sister walk forward, arm in arm with her husband, toward the newly crowned James I of England, V of Scotland, and Anne of Denmark. The flickering chandelier light caressed the satin of her gown, and murmurs rose like the hush of waves. "Is that the woman with the eye?" asked a quiet voice more curious than mocking. "She looks like she stepped out of a tale," another added, almost surprised. "Wasn't she lame?" someone else said. A man's mocking voice joined in. "And Farquhar rejected her. Maybe he was the one who couldn't see straight." The laughter that followed tasted like rusted iron. Aurnach inhaled slowly. He didn't turn. He said nothing. There was no need. Liobhan glanced sideways at him with a calm, satisfied expression. "Told you so," it seemed to say. He met her gaze. The love he felt for her was something that grew without clamor, like a deep root. It had led him to places once only filled with ruin. Farquhar was no longer a threat. He remained imprisoned, though Aurnach knew the king's prison was rarely a lifetime sentence for men with titles and allies, but something in the man had changed. He had lost his edge, like a sword forgotten in its sheath. He no longer haunted Aurnach's thoughts like a stubborn shadow. Urchenna no longer bled because of him, no longer faltered at the sound of his name, and that was enough. She had rebuilt her life with dignity without asking permission, and the old wound no longer shaped her future. Aurnach understood it then, as if the truth had been waiting for him all along. There was nothing left to reclaim. His eyes settled on Liobhan, now humming softly, as she rocked the baby with a natural protective motion. Then on Eibhlin, their daughter, frowning in her sleep, fists clenched as if already holding on to the world. Liobhan, as stubborn as ever, called her Avenue for no particular reason. But even that small, intimate eccentricity moved him. He felt something crack gently inside him. Not like a scream, but like ice melting under the sun, without noise, without warning. Just relief. Just truth. He had won, though not in the way a warrior usually understands victory. Not by sword, not by cunning. He had won something rarer, harder to keep, a home, a place to rest his brow without fear. He had won peace. And yes, he thought, letting his eyelids grow heavy for a moment, happiness, the quiet kind, the deep one that asks for no applause, was the most devastating of all personal victories. The end. Clarifying note on the betrothal. The idea of trial marriages, celebrated through hand-fasting and a cohabitation agreement, has been the subject of debate and confusion in literature and historical studies. Recently, some controversy has arisen regarding the authenticity of these marriages, particularly the notion that the practice of the year and a day is pure fiction derived from popular romances. Some historians and critics argue that such unions were nothing more than simple betrothal agreements, which once consummated, became formal and definitive marriages. It is true that in certain medieval and pre-modern contexts, betrothals or marriage promises were formal contracts, often involving mutual consent and the presence of witnesses. However, the notion of a trial marriage enacted through hand-fasting is an interpretation that has gained strength in modern times, especially in literature. This suggests that these hand-fasting unions, although initially representing an engagement agreement, were not sealed as a definitive marriage until certain conditions were met, conditions that included cohabitation and the consummation of the bond. In the British Isles, especially in Scotland, where Celtic customs and Roman legal influence intertwined, there existed forms of marriage that did not necessarily require a formal ecclesiastical ceremony to be considered valid. The concept of a trial marriage, which in some cases could last for a year and a day, appears to be documented in certain historical texts and oral traditions of specific clans. It is possible that the year and a day was not a strict rule, but rather a kind of probationary period during which both parties could evaluate their cohabitation before a final union was made. In this context, couples might follow certain formalities, such as living under the same roof, consenting to have children, and offering mutual support in family and territorial matters, without the imposition of traditional religious or legal rituals, until both parties chose to fully formalize the relationship. The narrative of the War of the One-Eyed Woman seems to capture this idea, portraying a union that, though initially seen as a trial marriage, gradually solidifies into a much deeper and lasting bond through the characters' interactions and the passage of time. In fact, many authors and scholars who have studied these customs agree that the handfasting relationship was a first step toward the consummation of a real marriage, even if its legal and religious formalization only occurred once both parties were fully committed. Thus, the handfasting union, while not necessarily recognized as a formal marriage in the strictest sense, carried social and personal connotations of validity that in practice brought it close to a true matrimonial relationship. This is reflected in historical texts that record this tradition, and helps us better understand the backdrop of many romantic stories based on these kinds of bonds.